Everybody able to see the screen?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So today we will start the liver. So as we know, liver occupies the right hypochondriac region. Are you able to see the cursor on my system?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Liver occupies the right hypochondriac region. It is about to 1.5 kgs in weight, and it occupies almost like 2.5% of the body weight. It consists 2.5% of the body weight. Okay, it has the speciality of the liver is it has a dual blood supply. It got its blood supply from the portal vein as well as the hepatic artery. So portal vein supplies 60 to 70% of the liver, 60 to 70% of the liver, whereas the hepatic artery supplies 30 to 40%. Okay. So for our convenience sake, liver is divided into anatomical lobules. Okay, for a study sake, to understand so many diseases, their pathogenesis. So liver is divided into liver lobules, which is an anatomical lobule as well as a functional lobule. Anatomical lobule, it consists of central vein. This is it's a branch of hepatic vein and portal triads. Okay, and in between the central vein and the portal triads, the hepatocytes or liver cells, they arrange in the form of trabecula. Trabecula means it's a linear rod-shaped structures. Okay, liver cells arranged in the form of anastomosing trabeculae. Okay, this anatomical lobule is almost like 1 to 2 mm in size in the liver. Okay, it is a hexagonal lobule. So with a central hepatic vein, as we discussed. The functional lobule is different from anatomical lobule. Out of the anatomical lobule, we take only a triangular portion of it, and we consider it as a functional lobule. It consists of central vein, and the other two edges consists of the portal triad. Can anybody say what are the components of the portal triad? Hello?
Portal vein.
Okay. It is there. Portal vein, HA. What is HA?
Hepatic artery.
BD is the bile duct. Okay.
Well,
Portal vein, hepatic artery, and bile duct. Duct, all these three together, we call it as a portal triad or a portal tract. Okay. This portal tract and with the central vein in a triangular shape, it is called it as a functional lobule or SNS. So this SNS, based on the blood supply, it is divided again into 3 zones. Okay, so artery usually supplies the oxygenated blood, and the portal vein consists of nutrient-rich blood. So the hepatocytes which are nearer to this portal triad, they receive a maximum amount of oxygenated blood and nutrition. So that is zone 1, and the hepatocytes which are far from the zone 1 and nearer to the central vein is zone 3, and in between it is a zone 2. So zone 3 cells, usually they contains a less blood supply when compared to the zone 1, and they contains a less nutrient supply when compared to the zone 1. So all these factors are very important in understanding the pathogenesis of so many liver diseases. So if you understand this basic concept, more or less, this same physiology or whatever it is there in all the diseases. Okay. So this is the histology of liver. See, this is roughly a hexagonal shape. So this is one lobule, anatomical lobule, with a central vein. This pink one are the RBC in the vein, and this is this completely consists of anatomical lobule. So this portion consists of portal triads. Okay, this portion. Okay, so I will show you in the high power view. So this is the central vein. Okay, so vein consists of thin endothelial lining. Okay, this one, and central vein, RBC in the central vein, and surrounded by hepatocytes. Okay, and this one is the portal triad. As we discussed, artery, duct, and hepatic portal vein. Hepatic artery, portal vein, and duct. Okay, so these three together we call it a portal tract. Okay, in between the central vein and the portal tract, liver cells are arranged in the form of trabecula. So these some words we have to use particularly in pathology. So to describe the liver histology, we have to use the liver hepatocytes are arranged in the trabecular pattern. Trabecular means a rod-shaped pattern. See here, these are the hepatocytes, anastomosing hepatocytes. We can say it's anastomosing like network of cells and arranged in the form of trabecula. So in between the trabeculae, there are the spaces. These are called sinusoids. Okay, so the blood flow from the hepatic artery, it flows through these sinusoids and it supplies the oxygen and nutrients to these hepatocytes, and this blood ultimately end up in hepatic central hepatic. Okay, so blood from the artery and portal vein, it enters into the central vein. Okay, so automatically the cells which are nearer to this portal tract receive a maximum amount of the nutrients and oxygen, whereas the cells which are nearer to the central vein receives a less amount of nutrients and oxygen. Did you understand the pathology, histology? Hello?
Sir.
All of you, can you turn on your mics? Did you understand the histology?
Yes, sir.
Can anybody verify that? What is your name? Ramchandra Raju?
Sir.
Yeah, anybody else can verify that? Only you are there in the class?
No, sir.
Then rest of them will be marked as absent. Okay.
Yes.
So this is the portal tract, and this is the central vein. In between, hepatocytes are arranged in the trabecular pattern. So, this is a much more elaborate view. These are the hepatocytes in between, and this is the sinusoidal region. Okay, so the sinusoidal region, blood flows through the sinusoidal region, and this sinusoidal region is lined by endothelial cells. Okay, in the luminal part of this sinusoidal region, there are cells called Kupffer cells. These are modified macrophages. Okay, and in between these endothelial cells and hepatocytes, there is a space called space of Deci, which consists of stellate cells, quiescent stellate cells. These are some sort of stem cells which can give rise to myofibroblasts in some diseases. Okay, so in between these hepatocytes, there are biliary canaliculae. These are nothing but spaces in between the cells with bound by a tight junctions and the plasma membrane protrusions. Okay, through this the bile flows. Okay, so what are the common liver diseases? You know, can anybody tell me what are the common liver diseases?
Cirrhosis of liver.
Cirrhosis of liver, good. Any other thing?
Hepatic carcinoma.
Hepatic carcinoma, okay.
Hepatitis.
Hepatitis, good. Any other disease?
No, sir.
Any other disease?
No, sir.
See, in the first year we might have read about the copper storing disease. What is that? Copper storage disorder. Iron storage disorder. Okay, Wilson's disease, hemochromatosis. Okay, all those things are liver diseases. But the common diseases, as you said, it's very correct. Viral hepatitis is the most common disease. and followed by non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and followed by alcoholic liver disease. Okay, and hepatocellular carcinoma. These four are the most common liver diseases. See, I think some of you might have seen your relatives or friends ultrasound reports with impression showing fatty liver. Did you ever saw reports like that?
No, sir.
Fatty liver. Some of your friends might have sent you some reports. So tell me your opinion like that. So then you see a fatty liver. That's the common finding. Okay, but the thing is, like, fatty liver can be seen in so many people because of the obesity and all. So those are, and without any habits like alcohol. So non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So that is also common, and the alcoholic liver diseases are common. Hepatocellular carcinomas are common. So can you tell me what viruses can cause hepatitis? What viruses can cause hepatitis?
No.
Huh? Did you take any vaccine against hepatitis viruses?
Hepatitis vaccine.
Hepatitis?
B.
What is that?
No, sir.
Huh? Okay, I'll tell you. Okay, so there is a so before going into the particular topics, I will discuss about in general about the liver injury and the repair mechanisms. Okay, that liver injury, whenever there is a liver injury, means not a physical injury. Okay, any infection to the liver or any drugs, toxins. So what is the function of the liver? Can you tell me?
Metabolism.
Yeah, so it participates in metabolism of so many diseases. Okay, any other thing?
Blood
Detoxification, that's right. Any other thing? Metabolism. So
degradation of protein.
Pardon?
Degradation of protein.
What is that?
Protein biosynthesis.
Yeah, protein albumin synthesis. Okay, coagulation factors. So vitamin K dependent coagulation factors all are seen in the as a functions of the liver. Okay, so whenever there is any problem with these things, in case of metabolism or in case of detoxification, so if we take excess alcohol, so whenever somebody takes alcohol, it has to be detoxified. That is done in the liver. So if you take excess alcohol, liver has to function more and more. So that will cause some sort of injury to the liver. So that for that, whatever it is, like whether it is alcohol or some drugs or some toxins or some viral infection or a bacterial infection or a parasite infection. So liver cells, hepatocytes and the parenchymal cells will respond to that. So hepatocytes, so whenever there is an infection, so hepatocytes, they'll try to fight with the infection. So they might die. So hepatocytes, they come back usually, they may undergo necrosis or they may undergo apoptosis. So what is apoptosis?
Sir.
Apoptosis, can you tell a single line definition of apoptosis?
Cell death.
Programmed cell death. Programmed cell death, not any cell death. Okay, so programmed cell death. And so usually when there is an infection, acute viral infection or whatever it is, so programmed cell death will happen, apoptosis will happen. So then the hepatocytes or some of the hepatocytes may undergo necrosis and they completely removed from the liver. So because of that, lot of hepatocytes will be gone. Only few hepatocytes will remain. Okay, those hepatocytes, whatever the remaining hepatocytes after that acute infection, they may undergo mitotic division and they form again, they regenerate the liver. So the regenerating capacity of the liver is so high. Okay, so whenever, see, do you know about the liver transplantation? Did you ever heard about the liver transplantation?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So what happens? Where do we get the liver from?
Okay.
To a transplant patient, where do we get? Is it from the live patient or from a dead patient? Live person or a dead patient?
I don't know.
Live. Okay. No, it's not only live. We can take it from the dead people also. But dead people like cadaver, that is called cadaver transplantation or a live, live hepatic transplantation. So cadaver transplantation is extremely difficult to get because some we have to enroll for a transplantation before die, so that whenever the person dies, then it will be notified to that programs, and they will come and they'll harvest the liver or whatever the organs they do. Okay, but that has to be like if somebody needs a liver very urgently, they are in a very decompensated state. So then one of their family members should donate the liver. Okay, so usually siblings' liver will be matched. So first their blood group should be matched, HLA typing should be matched. Then they will accept it for liver donation. Okay, so live patient, how we get a liver from the live patient? How much liver will take it?
20.
Okay, see, from a live patient, you can based on the weight of the patient, we will calculate it, and that part of the liver, almost 1/3 of the liver can be harvested from a live person. That liver can again be regenerated within 2 months for a donor. So, like a blood donation, see, if we donate blood now, when can you donate again?
3 months.
After 3 months. So, so after 3 months, your blood again will be like you will get your donated blood. Like that, liver in 2 months you can get your donated liver. So that is the beauty of the liver. But it is not possible with the kidney. We have to remove the whole kidney. So that that donor will lose one kidney. But not in case of liver. Liver, you will get your liver back as well as you can donate. Okay. So that's the beauty of the regenerative capacity of the liver. So whenever there is any injury, viral infections or anything, so after the infection is contained, the necrosis is over, the remaining hepatocytes, they will regenerate the liver. And the parenchymal response, see, while discussing that anatomy of the liver, histology of the liver, I told you in the space of DC, there are some mesenchymal stem cells. Those will regenerate and they form the fibrosis. So that fibrosis will form the scar. Okay. So parenchymal response and then scar formation and a regression. So if the regeneration of the hepatocytes is less than the stromal response, like fibrous formation, then the scars will form. Okay. So whenever there is a stoppage of the insult to the liver, like stoppage of alcohol or containing a viral infection, then a hepatocyte regeneration will dominate the scar formation, so that sometimes the scars will come down, because the scar formation is by the stem cells, myofibroblastic stem cells located in the space of disease. Okay, those myofibroblastic stem cells stop proliferation once the disease is contained. So, and then the third part is inflammation and immunity. See, this inflammation and immunity plays a major role in case of autoimmune hepatitis and viral hepatitis. See, for example, one person got infected with hepatitis B. Okay, so that hepatitis B will enter into the liver cells and it will start proliferating the liver cells, so that it will produce some antigens, hepatitis B surface antigens, otherwise called Australian antigens. Okay, and those antigens will again those antigens will be detected by our host cells, CD4 and CD8 cells, and they will form the antibodies and they will destroy those infected hepatocytes. So because of that, we are losing some hepatocytes. Okay, but that is called innate immunity. What about the adaptive immunity? So those antibodies formed in the initial infection, sometimes the CD8 cells, what they do is, even after cessation of the uh, uh, like viral infection, those CD8 cells will go and destroy all the inflammatory hepatocytes. So that will cause a lot of damage to the liver. So mainly in case of viral hepatitis, our own CD8 cells, which has to protect ourselves from the viral infections, they will destroy the normal hepatocytes. Okay, so because of that, liver will be damaged. So that there will be a continuous process of liver damage, and it will lead to the chronic hepatitis. Okay, so these three are the mechanisms: hepatocyte and parenchymal response, scar formation and regression, inflammation and immunity. So hepatocytes and parenchymal response usually in the acute phases, scar formation and regression in the chronic phases, and inflammation and immunity also seen in case of chronic liver diseases. Okay, so acute liver failure. So we need to know the definition of acute liver failure. Kindly observe this thing. Acute liver failure is defined as an acute liver illness associated with encephalopathy and coagulopathy that occurs within 26 weeks of the initial liver injury in the absence of pre-existing liver disease. That occurs within 26 weeks of initial injury. 26 weeks, that means almost 6 months. 6 months of initial liver injury in the absence of pre-existing liver disease. So when somebody got a viral infection or any other liver disease, and if they undergo, if they went into hepatic encephalopathy and coagulopathy, then we call it as acute liver failure only when it happens within 6 months of the starting of the disease. Okay, so the most common cause of acute liver failure is drugs and toxins. Can you tell me what are the drugs that can cause acute liver failure?
No.
Can anybody tell me? Who is 1780709? Who is chatting with me? What's the name? Sai Krishna. Okay. Can you tell me what are the drugs that can cause acute liver failure? See, it was written there, acetaminophen. So the most common cause of acute liver failure are drugs and toxins. The other causes are acute hepatitis A, hepatitis B infection, or hepatitis E infection. Hepatitis E infection, or rarely untreated HIV, herpes simplex virus, CMV, and adenovirus might cause acute liver failure. And the most common drug that causes acute liver failure is acetaminophen. What is acetaminophen? What is acetaminophen? Sai Krishna, do you know what is acetaminophen? Raju,
Sir,
do you know acetaminophen? What is acetaminophen?
no, sir.
If I tell you, you will laugh because every day you hear what is acetaminophen. Acetaminophen is nothing but paracetamol. Paracetamol. For what we use paracetamol?
Fever, cold,
Acetaminophen
cold,
is
headache.
paracetamol. Yeah, NSAIDs. So acetaminophen is a paracetamol. Okay. So sometimes the people start they take these acetaminophen, a lot of paracetamol tablets for suicide. That might cause acute liver failure. Okay. Then the other causes and the toxins, like sometimes some poisons they take for suicides, or sometimes some accidental poisoning, or accidental gas inhalations and all. They all be detoxified in the liver. They might cause acute liver failure, that is within 6 months of the start of the incident. Okay.
Yes.
Most common cause is paracetamol. Okay. Acute hepatitis A can cause acute liver failure. but it is very rare that hepatitis A will be controlled before it cause complete failure. As I said, complete failure is associated with encephalopathy and coagulopathy. Then only we call it as liver failure. Okay, so hepatitis A can cause liver injury, but it cannot cause. So rarely it causes acute liver failure. Even hepatitis B, acute hepatitis is very rare with hepatitis B, but sometimes it can cause acute liver failure. In hepatitis E, it also causes acute hepatitis, but failure is very rare. Okay, viral infections, failure is very rare. Okay, acute failure is very rare. So the mechanism of hepatocellular necrosis may be direct toxic damage, as with paracetamol. So I'll say paracetamol for your understanding. Okay, so it's very maybe direct toxic damage. The paracetamol will directly injure the hepatocytes so that the cells will get necrosed, and that necrotic material will be taken out by the Kupffer cells or macrophages. But more often is a variable combination of toxicity and immune mediated hepatocytes. As I told you, the virus will directly infect the hepatocytes and it will cause the necrosis of the cells, or that because of the virus, the CD8 cells, they got a response and they will destroy the hepatocytes. So that mechanism is seen in viral infections. Direct toxic damage is seen in case of acetaminophen. So all these are PG entrance questions. Okay, you may get question like this: direct toxic damage is seen in which of the following conditions? Acetaminophen, hepatitis viral infection, A infection, hepatitis B infection, all the above. It is all the above. Whereas immune-mediated hepatocyte destruction is seen in hepatitis virus, not with acetaminophen. Okay. So these are all PG entrance questions. Okay. Acute liver failure usually displays massive hepatic necrosis. So massive hepatic necrosis, like see hexagonal shape with central vein, portal triad, all that basic structure will be lost when we see under microscope. And with the broad regions of parenchymal loss. Parenchymal loss means hepatocyte loss surrounding islands of regenerating hepatocytes. Only few hepatocytes are seen which are regenerating. So that when there is a loss of hepatocytes, the livers are usually small and shrunken in size. Okay, so this is the gross chain. This reddish part is the necrotic material, and this yellowish part is the fatty liver. So whenever there is an acute poisoning by either paracetamol or any other poisonous conditions, then it might lead to the necrosis like this. See, this is the central vein surrounded by necrotic material. See, there is no specific distinct morphological features like cells. These are the normal hepatocytes. No, it is not seen here. Only fragmented material is seen. It is a necrotic material. And these are the regenerative hepatocytes which are left behind. And this is the portal triad. So massive necrosis. So as I said, why there is a necrosis only at the central vein? Can anybody explain me that? Why there is a necrosis only around the central vein, not around the portal tracts? Sai Krishna, Raju.
No, sir.
See, while explaining the structure, I told you zone 1, zone 2, and zone 3. So zone 3 has a less blood supply, less nutrient supply, so more damage. So damage started in the perivenular region. So first, then it will progress towards the portal tracts. Okay, that's the basic cause for that. Okay, so rarely there may be diffuse poisoning of liver cells, not only at the perivenular region. Sometimes the whole lobule get infected with the obvious cell death and parenchymal collapse, such as in diffuse microvascular steatosis. What is steatosis? Steatosis. Steatosis means fatty liver. Okay, steatosis related to the fatty liver of pregnancy or idiosyncratic reactions to toxins like valproate or tetracycline. So valproate, for what we use valproate? Valproic acid దేనికి వాడతాం? seizure control cheyadani. The tetracycline is an antibiotic. Okay, so long-term use of these drugs might cause microvesicular steatosis. That means multiple vesicles in the liver. So that leads to the diffuse poisoning of liver cells, not only near the vein. It affects all the parts of the lobule, zone 1, zone 2, and zone 3. So it is seen in case of valproate and tetracycline, or in case of fatty liver of pregnancy. And in these settings, usually related to the primary mitochondrial dysfunction. That is usually related to primary mitochondrial dysfunction. Hepatocytes are unable to perform their usual metabolic functions like glucose metabolism, lipid metabolism. They fail to do that. So that's why microvascular steatosis can happen. Okay. So the prominence of scar and ductular reactions in these livers depend on the nature and duration of the insult. See, acetaminophen, whenever somebody takes a lot of tablets of paracetamol, those effects start immediately. From the whenever they take a tablets, then immediately the liver starts detoxifying it. Then if it is not able to detoxify that paracetamol, it will undergo necrosis. Then it will lead to the acute hepatic failure. So there won't be any time to regenerate the hepatocytes or to form a scar and all these things. So in case of poisoning or paracetamol, large doses of paracetamol intake, there won't be any time to form a regenerative nodules or scar formation. So the prominence of scar and ductular reaction in these livers depend on the nature and duration of insult. So here the nature is the drugs induced and the duration of insult is acute. So that's why in case of paracetamol poisoning and all, there won't be any scar formation we see. But in case of hepatitis A, that infection is slow. So after 2 weeks, you will start having symptoms. So the disease process will take 2 weeks of time, and it is slow in process. That's why there are some areas of ductular reactions or a scar formation in a very rare late conditions. Okay. So acetaminophen overdose usually take place within hours to days. Okay. So that is why it won't allow any time for a scar formation or regeneration. So whereas in acute viral infections, so there can be a scar formation. So what are the clinical manifestations of acute liver failure? So how will you know acute liver failure? How will any liver disease? So usually we see jaundice. It is not mandatory to have a jaundice in all liver diseases, but usually we see jaundice. And hepatic encephalopathy. Hepatic encephalopathy means liver detoxifies so many things, so that like ammonia concentration will increase, and it will cause some damage to the brain, so that the patients will have symptoms like disorientation, or they might end up in coma. Okay, and coagulopathy, because of vitamin K dependent coagulation factors, if we are deficient, it might lead to the easy bruisability of the skin or sometimes the bleeding. Okay, then the portal hypertension, it is very rare in case of acute liver failure. It is common in the chronic liver failure. Portal hypertension is nothing but a complete dilatation of the portal venous system, so that the blood stasis will be there, so that there will be a formation of hemorrhoids, or there will be formation of esophageal varices. Okay, so then hepatorenal syndrome, because of that these metabolic alterations, there will be a renal failure. That is a hepatorenal syndrome. So these are the clinical manifestations of acute hepatic failure. And the chronic liver failure, so most common causes are hepatitis B. See, you have to remember these things. Chronic liver failure, most common causes are hepatitis B, hepatitis C, and alcoholic liver disease. Not hepatitis A, not hepatitis E, or hepatitis D. So you have to know the chronic liver failure is most commonly due to B and C. Okay, in acute failure, it is because of A and E. Okay, then alcoholic liver disease. All these three things are the most common causes of chronic liver failure. And the less common causes are Wilson's disease. What is Wilson's disease?
High amount of copper.
No, I told you, no, copper metabolism.
Yes.
Okay, alpha-1 antitrypsin and the long-term uses of drugs, isoniazid, methyl dopa, methotrexate, What is isoniazid? Where do we use isoniazid? For which disease? Sai Krishna. Isoniazid for which disease? Anti-tubercular drug. Okay. And in case of autoimmune hepatitis, also chronic liver disease might be seen. Primary biliary cirrhosis, primary sclerosing cholangitis, chronic schistosomiasis, and fibropolycystic liver disease, etc. Okay. And this is the cirrhotic liver, where you see normally the liver is soft in texture. Okay. It is smooth in texture, but here multiple nodules are there. So these nodules are because of these are regenerative nodules. In between the nodules, this is the fibrotic tissue. Okay, because of excessive fibrosis, this nodular structure will form. Okay, so this is the cirrhotic liver. See, when we see under microscope, normally the liver has to be like this with a central vein and the portal triads and all. But when there is a chronic liver failure, there will be excess fibrous tissue. So this blue portion is the fibrous tissue. This slide was stained by Mason's trichrome stain. So fibrous tissue stained as a blue. So this blue color is the Mason's fibrous tissue, and this pink color is a liver tissue, leftover liver tissue or a regenerating hepatocytes. Okay. So when there is excess of fibrous tissue, it is seen in the chronic liver failure or in cases of cirrhosis of liver. So how we while reporting these cases, how will we what classification we use is a child pug classification of cirrhosis. So we grade this fibrosis and the regenerating hepatocytes and all, so that if we take biopsy now, if we see a picture like this after treating infection with antiviral drugs, we might see this. So that means that liver is regenerating. If it is more that this fibrosis is increased, that liver is not regenerating and it is slowly growing into end stage liver disease. So this child pug classification helps in the tracking of progression of the disease or the diagnosis of the cirrhosis and all. Okay. So these are the different signs of cirrhosis. So hepatic enlargement and hepatic ascites will be there, and periumbilical capitomedusa, hepatic encephalopathy is there, malnutrition because of loss of albumin and all. So many angiomas are there. Because of the portal hypertension, you see esophageal varices and you see hemorrhoids, and the testicular atrophy is there because of the corticosteroid metabolism. So these are all signs and symptoms of cirrhosis. So now we discuss about the viral hepatitis. So normally viral hepatitis, some viruses, they specifically cause viral hepatitis. So those are called hepatotropic viruses. They are again divided into A, B, C, D, and E. Okay, G is there, but it's normally we don't read much about the D, G. Okay, A, B, C, D, E, and G. Okay, so these viruses should be called. So unless otherwise specified, hepatitis, viral hepatitis means either it might be because of A, B, C, D, or E. Okay, other viruses can also cause hepatitis. Those are yellow fever viruses or herpes simplex virus, CMV, and Epstein-Barr virus. Okay, so unless otherwise specified, viral hepatitis means A, B, C, D, and E. So these viruses specifically cause liver disease. That is why they are named as hepatitis viruses. Hepatitis A, B, C, D, and E. So hepatitis A, except B and D, except hepatitis B, remaining all are RNA viruses. So you have to remember this. In a PG entrance question, which of the following is a DNA virus? So hepatitis B is a DNA virus, C is RNA virus, A is RNA virus, D is RNA, and E are RNA viruses. And then family hepatovirus, it is a picornavirus. Hepatitis A is picornavirus, B is hepatinovirus, C is flaviviridae, and D is a subviral particle of delta viridae family, and then E is epivirus. Okay, and the most important part is route of transmission. Sai Krishna, can you tell me what are all the blood tests we do before giving blood transfusion? Sai Krishna, are you there? What are all the blood tests we do before transfusion? We directly give a donor's blood to the patient, or we do any blood tests? Raju, can you tell me?
Yes, sir. We do a blood test that any person is an hepatitis carrier or no.
Which hepatitis, for which hepatitis we do blood tests?
Hepatitis B.
And that's
C,
all.
sir.
Why we don't do hepatitis A, D, and E? Because they won't transmit through the blood. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So
Yes, sir.
hepatitis B and C can be done. And any other blood test, Sai Krishna? Apart from hepatitis B and C, you forgot the most important disease which can be transmitted through blood. HIV, good. And any other disease? We also screen for malaria. Okay. So we do malaria, we do syphilis, we do hepatitis B, we do hepatitis C. Okay. All these tests will be done before transfusing that blood to the patients. Okay. Because hepatitis B and C are through parenteral transfusion, that means a blood transfusion, or a sexual contact, or a perinatal. Perinatal means during birth. Okay, from mother to baby. Okay, and then in hepatitis C, parenteral, that is blood, through blood. Intranasal cocaine use is a risk factor. That means like drug users. Hepatitis B, D can also be because of parenteral transfusion, but without hepatitis B, D won't occur. So we only do for hepatitis B. Okay, then fecal-oral transmission, that is through contaminated food and water. It is seen in the hepatitis A and E. So that fecal-oral transmission, whatever the viruses that transmits through fecal-oral transmission, they cause acute hepatitis. Whatever the viruses that cause parenteral transmission, or because of sexual contact, or because of drugs, those cause chronic hepatitis. Okay, and the frequency of chronic liver disease is a chronic liver disease can never be seen in the hepatitis A and E infections, and whereas the chronic liver disease is seen in 5 to 10% of hepatitis B, and it is more than 80%. So whenever somebody contacted with hepatitis C, there is every chance of them to get a chronic liver disease, and the hepatitis D is about 10%, but 90 to 100% for super infection. Okay, and the diagnosis of hepatitis A is by IgM antibody testing. Hepatitis B is by hepatitis B surface antigen or antibody to hepatitis core. HBC means core antigen or PCR. Okay, and then hepatitis C is the third generation antibody detection or a PCR for HCV RNA. And hepatitis D by IgM and IgG antibodies and HDV RNA serum and HDV antigen in the liver. And hepatitis E by IgM antibodies. Okay, IgM and IgG antibodies or a PCR for HIV. Okay, these are the diagnostic functions. So incubation period is 2 to 6 weeks for HIV, and 4 to 26 weeks for HBV, and 2 to 26 weeks for HCV, and so on. Okay. And the carrier state, that means patients will still can transmit the disease, but they don't have any symptoms or some like that. So that carrier state is not there in HIV, but it is seen in HBV and HCV, and 1 to 2 donors, 2% donors of HGV. That's very rare. Okay. The cancer, this is much more important, Sai Krishna and Raju. So which of the following viral infections can cause hepatocellular carcinoma? Hepatitis B and C. Okay, those two conditions may lead to the chronic liver disease, and they may cause hepatocellular carcinoma. Okay, you have to remember that. So A will never cause chronic infection. A can never be undergone into the carrier state. A can never cause cancer. Whereas the same with the E. And HBV and HCV, they both cause chronic liver disease. They both cause they both may lead to the cirrhosis. They both may lead to the hepatocellular carcinoma. Okay.
Yes, sir.
One more. Okay, hepatitis A, as we discussed, it is seen in the fecal-oral transmission usually occurs in the developing countries or underdeveloped countries. So it is because of the substandard hygiene. So 25% of the clinically evident acute hepatitis is because of hepatitis A infection. Okay, and it is rare after childhood because by the childhood, by the time we become adults, we develop antibodies against that, so that it is rare after childhood. In the fecal-oral route, it is the main cause. So virus is shed in the feces for 2 to 3 weeks before and 1 week after the onset of jaundice. And incubation period is 2 to 6 weeks and no carrier state or chronicity. Mild or symptomatic in most cases and rarely fulminant hepatitis. Fulminant means severe, life-threatening hepatitis. So rarely it causes fulminant hepatitis. And the IgM antibody in serum is a reliable marker for this disease. So the hepatitis B. So what type of virus? Is it RNA virus or DNA virus?
RNA virus. RNA, sir.
No. Hepatitis B is the only DNA virus. Remaining all are RNA viruses. Okay? Remember that. You have to remember that. Okay, that is very, very important point. So this is a DNA virus. It causes serum hepatitis. So clinical spectrum by hepatitis B virus infection. So it causes acute hepatitis. Like as soon as the infection, getting a jaundice or fever, that is very, very rare. So see, I know one person, like he was around 65-year-old. Okay, 65-year-old. Suddenly he developed some vague symptoms like weight loss and all. So when they took him to the hospital, they screened him for the hepatitis B and C. He was diagnosed as a hepatitis C infection. Okay, but he never had any blood transfusion. He never had, like he's a very old person, very orthodox person. So might not be having multiple sexual partners, but still he got that viral infection. So he don't know when he got that infection. So we saw that infection. By the time we diagnosed that infection, he was already having a cirrhosis and he was already having the esophageal varices, and that means a portal hypertension. So that means the disease might have occurred to him almost like 10 to 20 years back. So that is the thing. So we don't know when the disease occurs. So see, somebody might have a blood transfusion now or contact with contaminated blood now. They might not be having any symptoms or any illness at all. But after 20 years or suddenly they might develop they might present with a cirrhosis or a portal hypertension. Or if they undergo any surgery, before surgery we do screening. So they might be diagnosed with the hepatitis B or C infection. That is called chronic hepatitis. Okay, they'll never show any acute hepatitis symptoms. So rarely hepatitis B can cause acute hepatitis symptoms. I will tell you one example. So one of my friend's father, he was operated for gallbladder pathology. So while operating him, he was transfused with blood. But unfortunately, that blood was contaminated with hepatitis B. So he got hepatitis B blood, whole packet. That is a massive transfusion, right? Normally, how we get hepatitis B infection? By touching the blood, or by having an injection, something like that. Okay, but injection or by touching the blood, we usually get only few drops or very little quantity of hepatitis virus. But by transfusion, you will get a huge quantity at the same time. So he, in 2 months, he died because of fulminant hepatitis. Hepatitis because of hepatitis B infection. So that is very rare. Rarely happens with hepatitis B and C. And the chronic non-progressive hepatitis. So they have chronic hepatitis. That means they have antibodies against hepatitis B, but that is non-progressive. They never have any typical liver disease. And the progressive chronic hepatitis ending in cirrhosis. That is the other form of presentation of hepatitis B. And the asymptomatic carrier state. I cannot say which hospital. Huh? It is only an example. Huh? We should not discuss about the hospital. Okay. And then asymptomatic carrier state. They have ability to transmit the disease, but they don't have any symptoms. And then backdrop for hepatitis D. Hepatitis D can cause a disease only in the presence of hepatitis B. Without hepatitis B infection, hepatitis D cannot cause any disease. So these are the various clinical spectrum of hepatitis B virus patients. This is hepatinovirus, and the mature virus particle is called Dane particle. Okay, and it has a core protein. So hepatitis B core antigen, because of this core protein, we have hepatitis B core antigen and hepatitis B envelope antigen, HBeAg, HBCAg and HBeAg. Okay, HBC is not hepatitis C. Hepatitis B core antigen. HB is there. Hepatitis B envelope antigen, and the envelope glycoprotein it shows hepatitis B surface antigen, and the DNA polymerase enzyme, which helps in the replication of the viruses, and then HBX, which is also necessary for viral replication, and it is one of the HBX gene is one of the cause for progression of the hepatitis B infection into the hepatocellular carcinoma. So this can come as a PG entrance question for you. Okay. And then hepatitis B virus infection. So the proliferation phase, episomal DNA with the formation of complete virions and all antigens. So cell surface expression of hepatitis B surface antigen and hepatitis B core antigen lead to activation of CD8 T cells. I told you these activated CD8 T cells, which in turn damages the liver, not virus. Virus causes a little damage, but this activated our own CD8 cells will cause more damage to the liver. And the integrative phase, virus DNA is incorporated into the host cell DNA with the cessation of viral part replication. Infectivity ends and the liver damage subsides. See, when the viral particle is incorporated into the host cell DNA, virus stops replicating. So we don't have any more virus. So we don't have any more surface antigen increasing the concentration of surface antigen. So there won't be any liver damage. So, but still that virus will be there in our body. So because of this, complete eradication of hepatitis B virus inside the body is highly impossible. We cannot completely cure hepatitis B infection because of this virus. DNA is incorporated into the host cell DNA. Okay. And then hepatitis B. So worldwide carrier rates 300 million people are there. So it is endemic in Africa and even in India. Like I see almost like 2 to 5 new cases every week. I see 2 to 5 new cases every week. That means all of us know some or other hepatitis B positive cases, right? Do you know any hepatitis B positive cases? Friends, family, relatives? Do you know anybody?
No, sir.
No, you don't know. That's very rare. You might be knowing in the next week. Okay, because that much common is hepatitis B infection. Okay, it is present in all fluids of the body See, for hepatitis B, active disease, if active disease is there, the serum is contaminated, semen is contaminated, and then is body fluids like saliva and all contaminated. So it is highly infectious disease. Okay, transmitted by transfusion, IV drugs use, dialysis. See, so many nowadays, so many people are undergoing dialysis. So dialysis patients are usually getting infected with hepatitis C, followed by hepatitis B. So because of these dialysis machines, the same dialysis machine we use for the other patient. So before that, sometimes the decontamination may not work out. So that if the one person is hepatitis B positive, the subsequent patient might get positive. The homosexual activity, needle stick accidents, and a transplant, transplacental, like from mother to baby. Okay, see, I'll tell you one example. When I was in a postgraduate, like in 2009, I was accidentally pricked with the needle. That needle, like I was doing FNAC for a HIV positive patient. That needle went through his neck to my finger. Okay, so he was HIV positive and he was having tuberculosis. So immediately I went to the HIV center, and immediately I was tested. It was negative. Then I was given ART therapy for 1 month. So because of that, maybe because of that, or maybe because of less infectivity of HIV, I didn't get HIV. So I have been tested for so many times afterwards. I never got that infection. But it is not for hepatitis B and C. If that kind of accident might have happened to me, I might have got hepatitis B and C. So that much infectivity is there for hepatitis B and C, whereas HIV is less infective when compared to hepatitis B and C. So hepatitis B and C are much more dangerous than HIV. Okay, got it?
Yes, sir.
So whenever we get infected, the first hepatitis B surface antigen appears on the hepatocytes. So these antigens peaks during the overt disease and declines in 3 to 6 months. And after these antigens, hepatitis surface antibodies will develop. And then during the active infection, hepatitis B envelope antigen, HBV DNA polymerase appears. Madam, 2 minutes. 2 minutes. Appears, and see, I can continue this in the next class. Hepatitis B diagnosis, because this is very important part. After this, I will tell you about the hepatitis C and hepatitis D. Hepatitis C, D, and E, and then followed by chronic liver parenchymal changes. Okay, so we'll continue this class in the next tomorrow. Okay, so who are all present for this? Sai Krishna, and what is your number, Sai Krishna? Raju, what is your number?
5, sir.
Number 5.
Sai Krishna 1, sir.
1. So both of you present for this class. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, I'll give attendance to both of you. So next class will continue. Wait for 10 minutes. Okay.
Yes.